Joining us now to analyze the media, the president, and the transition, Frank Luntz, the veteran Republican pollster. And Frank, with the death toll from coronavirus just going higher and higher, it's now about 330,000 Americans. What's your take on the whole year's coronavirus coverage by the media, which played it up? At times, President Trump played it down. Then we have the vaccines. What's been the impact on the credibility of the press?
It's horrible. It's horrible in the credibility of the politicians. It's been very damaging for the credibility of the press. Everyone has suffered. We did a study for the de Beaumont Foundation. And what we found is that there's still about a third of Americans that are nervous about this vaccine, and we need them to take it. And my frustration right now, as we end this year, is that the president is tweeting about an election that's over with. And instead, he should be tweeting about saving lives, about taking this vaccine. And ironically, Howie, the group that is most likely to not be eager to take the vaccine are young Republicans, Republicans under age 50. His own vote is listening to him, and they don't realize how important this is. They need to wake up. The Black community, the Latino community, the young Republican community, we need people to take the vaccine, and that's what the president should be talking about. And frankly, that's what the press should be talking about. Enough of the politics. Enough about what Trump is saying about the election. Focus on saving lives.
Right. But since you make that point, I mean, some of your friends on the right don't seem particularly perturbed about some of the extreme measures being talked about. The president hasn't embraced them, but he is still, as you say, tweeting and talking about a rigged election, calling Joe Biden a fake president yesterday. Can you imagine the conservative reaction if Barack Obama in 2012 lost the Electoral College and was having meetings talking about, rerunning, using the military, for example, to rerun the election in certain states?
You're correct. Absolutely. And I'm not sure if they're going to be my friends. I know that it's having an impact on Fox. It's having an impact on Republicans in the House and the Senate. It feels like this president's trying to do as much damage as he can, not just to Mitch McConnell, but the Republicans in the House and in the Senate. And the press is glad to go along because it'll help in that final race of 2020 in Georgia. And I'm afraid, and I believe, that those two Republicans may well lose on the 5th of January because of what the president is doing right now. The media is helping him, and this should not be happening. That election should be waged separately from the ugliness that's happening here in Washington.
Well, what about the 6th of January, which is the day, and usually it's routine that Congress accepts formally the results of the Electoral College, and the president has talked about, and some of his allies have talked about, having a Republican senator and House member from the same state challenging that, which would lead to a big congressional debate. Do you see a good chance of that happening? And if so, how does the press cover it?
Frankly, I do see it happening. I know the president's trying to make it happen. I know that there are House members who are going to help him make that happen. What they don't realize is the ramifications, is the consequences. And this is not the responsibility of the press to take sides. It is the responsibility of them to report what's happening accurately and in a balanced way. And to a great degree, they're doing that. But I want to emphasize the impact. If the Republicans lose that Senate race in Georgia, and again, this is not the responsibility of the press, you may have two new states, Puerto Rico and D.C., you may have the packing of the court, you may have the repeal of the tax cuts, and the president is spending his time just upsetting as many people as he can, driving a wedge between those two Senate candidates and what will be this fundamental change in American democracy. And guys, just wake the hell up. And Howie, I know you care about numbers. The Republicans have never trusted the press less. The Democrats actually trust the press more. I'm watching among independents and floating voters, and their numbers for the press are falling with every successive month. The credibility of the press among independents who don't have a political bone in this, they're believing that the press is taking sides, and they're trying to encourage a Democratic win in the Senate in Georgia.
But since you have the courts and Bill Barr's Justice Department, he, of course, has just resigned, finding no evidence of widespread fraud, despite the president repeatedly pressing these claims. The question I would ask is, every poll shows that you have a majority of Republicans not believing the media in that this was a fair election. And a lot of people feel very strongly about this. So that suggests to me either that the media have failed or that the level of distrust is so great that conservatives and maybe even you're saying independents are not going to believe much of what the press says.
It's both of those. And I'm trying to figure out how to fix it, because in the end, regardless of whether you like or dislike their approach, in the end, our democracy depends on a media that is trusted, that has trust and confidence. It depends on that fourth estate holding people accountable. Howie, we need that. Whether or not we disagree with what the media writes or what they say, we need them to be honest brokers of this, and we need them to hold Republicans and Democrats accountable. And they are incapable of doing it. The president is just making a situation worse. We're ending this year with what I believe is not a constitutional crisis. It's a crisis of credibility. It's a crisis of confidence. And frankly, I don't know how to fix it.
Well, last point, I've got about half a minute. You talked about holding also Democrats accountable. What do you think about the way that Joe Biden is being covered so far? And if he is covered in a relatively easy way compared to Trump, doesn't that further convince people there's a double standard, a blatant double standard in the press?
Not only is that a fair point, it's an accurate point. It's a love fest that the Democrats are having the same trouble with their progressive wing that the Republicans are having with some Trump voters, but you don't hear about that. Or you hear about that where they're taking the side of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. And I'll make one final point. I am shocked.
Quickly.
Donald Trump has found support among Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on this COVID relief package. That should waken up everybody that there's something wrong that's going on right now.